Exercise 12, SolidWorks 2018. In this exercise, we're going to take a look at the functionality when it comes to converting legacy data from a 2D format, for example, like what you see here, a drawing, into a 3D model. Many companies have 2D legacy data from old CAD systems, and they might want to convert these to 3D. And this exercise will go through that method, and we'll take a look at both DWG and DXF files in this case. So let's begin. First of all, go to the Vertanu1 homepage, so vertanu1.com, and then go to Part Files, and on the red column, find the Exercise 12 DWG. Go ahead and select it, and go ahead and download it. Your download might be up here as well, so if you can't find it in one place, look in the other. And in this case, we just want to save the file. And now it should be saved in our downloads directory. So from SolidWorks, we could go up here. Now, if you don't have your pull-down menus available, remember, you just click on this little arrow here, and you could tack it in up here. And now we could go to File Open, or there's the File Open right here. And we could go ahead and find our download directory. And down below here where it says Custom, you could either select all files or filter out files that you might not want to see. For example, this is a DWG file. So by selecting DWG, we'll then see the Exercise 12 DWG file. Go ahead and select Open. Now you have a number of options when you're importing a DWG or DXF file, these 2D formats. So the first thing it shows you here, you could create a new SolidWorks drawing and convert the entities. And so perhaps you might just want to have that 2D drawing as a native SolidWorks format. That's what you could do. But there's also some advantages there. You could actually utilize the geometry in there and copy and paste it into your model and then create the model from that. That works especially well with very large 2D CAD drawings. And so there's some advantages in that respect. Now you can also import it into a native sheet, or into a native format. So for example, you might have like formats from other CAD systems that have customer names in the title blocks and things like that set up for your customers. You could import those in here and save them as that. You also you could import into a part file right here, and you could import 2D sketch or 3D curves for the model. There's also import mechanical desktop data. So old mechanical desktop data can be imported that way as well. But we're going to go ahead and first start off with just creating a new drawing. And I'm going to show you a little technique that's kind of nice, especially with large format. So let's go ahead and hit Next. Now here you can actually see there's an image of the drawing. You could change it to a white background if you prefer, or keep it black. And then over here on the left you have your layers. Now you could adjust your layers here or later on in the drawing. So for example, if there's certain layers that you may not want to see, for example, maybe I don't want to see the dimensions, I could turn those off. Or I could turn off the border or cross-hatching, things like that. In this case, the crosshatch was not in there, but that's okay. We could turn off the border and eliminate some of the things we might not want to see. I'm going to leave a couple of these things on here just so we can see them later on in the model. You also have the ability in here to zoom up and take a closer look at things. I accidentally moved it off of the sheet there. But you could also sometimes you might want to take a look at the title block and see what scale it was native to it. So you might have to scale this and adjust it. And in this case, oops, I did it again. But anyhow, so you have the ability to do that. I'm going to go ahead and hit Next again. And then this is where SolidWorks does its best to figure out and calculate what size print that is. Like in this case, the paper landscape C. But sometimes there's unusual formats, and so you might have to adjust that somewhat. Otherwise, just leave it as is. And here you could adjust the scale. So if it were a half scale, you might want to do a 2:1 scale to increase it to its normal size or something like that. Go ahead and hit finish. All right, and now we could actually see our outlines and some of the geometry here. We eliminated a few things, but let's say we want to eliminate a few more of these. As I said, you could actually right-click up here in this gray area and select Line Format. And Line Format appears in the lower left here. And this is where you have your layer options or layer properties. So you have the ability to go in here, and perhaps you don't want to see some of those. Again, we have the ability to turn off the border from here, as well as any additional things we might not want to see. And it looks like the layers are a little bit, there's a little slight variation here, but I turned off the cross hatching and that came in as layer 4. So when this was exported, it came out a little different than I expected. But that's okay. We could leave the rest of it in here and use this geometry. Okay, so when you're deciding what to do with some of this geometry, what you can do, like I said, you could leave it as is, or you could actually utilize it for the 3D model. What we have here, if we were to take this profile and copy it into a model or a part file, we could extrude it, but you might notice there's actually a taper on those sides. There's like an angle, so that wouldn't do us much good. We're actually better off taking one of these section views and actually bringing them in and revolving it. And in fact, we have that as our center line we could use, and it looks like this would be the most significant profile. If you look at the top profile, you have a segment taken out of it. Thus, what would happen if you revolve that, you would have two cylindrical parts that were separate. So you don't want that one. So this is what we're going to do. We're just going to click up here and drag across to select what we want. So notice in that envelope, when I clicked and I dragged across, I captured these elements here, these entities. Go ahead, and what you can do now, you could go up to Edit and Copy. Now we're going to go to New, Part, and hit OK. And I know what you're thinking. There was an option to import it directly into a part. Be aware, depending upon how many resources your computer has, SolidWorks doesn't always handle in a part file, or especially in a sketch, a huge file that you might have. You might have a very large AutoCAD file, and all those lines, all the text, all the geometry, it could be a little literal mess to have to deal with. And so that's why the method I'm showing you might be of benefit, especially for large files. I'll show you how to import one into a part a little bit later, directly into a part. But in this case, we stole that particular view was a right section view. So we could drop it in on the right plane. So you click on the plane here, and now you could go to Edit and Paste. And now you might not see anything, but hit your F key on your keyboard. That's zoom to fit. And now we can actually see we have that profile carried over. Go ahead, double click on it. If you're unable to double click on it and get it to shade like that, go over here to the right, or to the left, or anywhere on the sketch, and you just right click, and there's an Edit Sketch option. So you can edit the sketch that way if double click doesn't work. I'm going to hit my space bar, and I'm going to go to the right view orientation. Okay, so we see it's a water type boundary condition. So that's okay, and the way we know that is because it's shaded on the inside. If it were not shaded, that would indicate that there's open gaps. That is a great opportunity to import this entire drawing directly into a model, because there's actually tools in there that will close tiny little gaps for you. And we'll look at that in a moment. But first, we're in good shape here. That's going to be our revolve. So we could go ahead now, and if we want, before we go ahead and revolve it, which SolidWorks will allow us to revolve it right now, but maybe we want to fully define it. If you right click, you'll see fully defined sketch. So if you right click anywhere on it, you'll see fully defined sketch. If you can't find that fully defined sketch, it's under the tools, and it should be under relations, let's see here, sketch tools. Let's see, okay, it's somewhere in here. Unfortunately, I lost where it is. So I'm going to use it in here later on. Oh, there, it's under dimension, sorry. Dimension and fully defined sketch. So go ahead and select that. Now on the left you have some options. You have the ability to add both relations and dimensions, and what types of dimensions you may or may not want to have it add. And also, do you want baseline dimensions, or how do you want it dimensioned? You have baseline, ordinate, chain. You could select individual entities and calculate, but I'm going to go ahead and just hit all entities as the default and hit calculate. Now it may not dimension it exactly how you would do it. As you can see here, it dimension it to the origin, and that could be an issue too because we really didn't want it offset from the origin. The reason it brought that over from the where it's located is because that is the lower left corner of the actual drawing that we stole this from. So let's go ahead and hit undo right here and cancel that. What we're going to do instead, and if you went too far into this, there's always the undo button up here. I want to show you how to move this over here. Now there is a move entities tool, but I'm going to show you without having to click on another icon and learn it just yet. You could do this. You could just click and drag a fence to surround that geometry. Now release it, then hold Control and see this little point here? That's the center. Go ahead and grab it with your mouse button and begin to drag this over to that point, to the origin. But release Control first. And then once you get it there, now remember, I released Control first. I could get it over the origin. When I get the orange dot over the origin, release it, and it should transplant it. Now, if you held Control and didn't let go, you would have a copy of it up here in the upper right, which you could then delete, but either way works. Okay, now that we have this, let's go back, and this time I'm going to just right-click on that, use fully defined sketch. And I'm going to go ahead, in this case, let's see, the point origin is going to be the default for the vertical and as well as the horizontal. We could change that by selecting different entities, but I'm going to go ahead and just hit calculate. And there we go. Now, not only did it add dimensions, it added relations. And the way you know that is if you click anywhere, look at that, there's tangency, tangency, horizontal, and you're going to find those all over the place. So it's pretty impressive that it automatically did that all for us. Okay, moving along, now we're ready to revolve this. So if we go to Features, we could go to Revolve Boss Base, select that line up there, and then, oh, actually, that's for the selected contour. I'm sorry, right-click in here, clear the selection. Because this is an object line, it's not a dashed center line, it thought that we might want to extrude that in some way. But first, with selected contours blue here, go ahead and select that shaded blue surface in there. Now click up here on axis of revolution and go ahead and select that blue line. And now you'll see it will revolve along that 360 degrees. Hit apply, and now we have our wheel. Now we're not quite done yet. We still want to put in those cutouts in here. So let's see how we'll go about doing that. Go to Window, and you could either tile vertically or you could go back to the drawing. Another quick key for that is Control and Tab. If you hold, I'm going to just click off of that. If you hold Control and you hit Tab, it will toggle between the drawing and the part, and you just release it and it will allow you to go back to that. So Control and Tab is a fast key to toggle between documents inside SolidWorks. All right, that being said, now what we want to do is steal this inner edge of this particular one up here. We'll just grab that one. And here's a neat little trick. You could right click on this edge and you'll find, let's see here, hold on a second. I'm looking for select chain, but I'm not seeing it here, but that's okay. We could go ahead and just Control select and click on these entities, these four here. Okay. And once you have those, now you could go up to Edit, Copy. And you know the fast keys, you could use those instead too. But I'm going to copy that. Now I'm going to use my little trick, Control Tab, to bring me back to the part. Now select the front plane, because that was based off of the front view orientation. So if you select the front plane, you could go to Edit and Paste. Now to see where that is, again, hit your F key, and you'll see it's floating up there in space. Again, it's relative to where it was on the drawing, and the origin is the lower left corner of the print. So let's hit our spacebar and go to the front view orientation so we're aligned. And again, you could double click on this geometry. If the double click doesn't work, just right click and you'll see there's an edit sketch option up there usually to do it, or else you find the sketch right here, right click, and you'll find edit sketch. It's usually right about there. Okay, now we're going to just do our little trick. We're going to drag a fence to surround this so it's in an envelope, and see that center point? That's the center point of the top arc, which just so happens to align to the center of the origin. So we could hold Control, grab this, release Control before you get there, and then once you get there on the origin, you'll see the preview and you'll get the orange dot. Release it, and now it's located. Again, we could right click and fully define sketch, hit Calculate, hit the green check, and now let's go to Features and Extrude Cut. For the Extrude Cut, because you'll see it's in the center of the model, we need to go to through all, both sides, and hit the green check. Okay, now what I'm seeing here is it actually ended up making our model a thin feature. That was not my intention. That was an error. So I'm going to have to go back and fix that. I'm going to go back to the Revolve Thin here, and I didn't notice that earlier. Right click and edit the feature. Let's see if we could disable thin feature. Unfortunately, it turned it on, and that is sometimes because it could have possibly been due to an opening, but it showed it shaded. So you're getting to experience a little bit of troubleshooting here. I didn't expect that to do that. So what I can do here, because it's not letting me go back, at least from what I can see, and I'm kind of on the spot, so I'm not going to waste too much time here. I'm going to go ahead and right click and delete it. And I'm not going to, let's see, we'll go ahead and delete the child feature, which is the opening there, but it should leave the sketch, at least I'm hoping. Let's go ahead and hit yes. There we go. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and edit this first sketch, and I'm going to just go ahead and change this. I'm going to click on that, change it to a construction geometry, thus making it suitable for a revolve in under normal circumstances. Let's go to Features and Revolve Boss Base. And you'll notice thin feature is disabled now. So I suspect that was because that was an object line. I was hoping it would go ahead and still let us do it without a thin feature, but unfortunately it didn't. And perhaps I could have turned off thin feature earlier, but I just fixed it this way. Okay, I'm going to hit the green check again. And now I could go and select that sketch and recut it. So I'm just going to go to Extrude Cut and Mid-Plane. I'm sorry, not mid-plane, through all both. Hit the green check. And you can see now it is a solid. All right, at that point, now what we want to do is we're going to go ahead and put the fillets on here. So go to the fillet tool. Now, if you're not sure what the fillet or the radius was off the drawing, here's a little thing you could do. You could Control Tab back here, and let's measure one of the fillets. So that fillet cut cross section right there, let's it was probably on the print somewhere that I turned off, but that's okay. If I recall, these are all pretty much typical. You could just go in here and select one of these under the Evaluate. Go to Evaluate, go to Measure, select that, and we see 0.1 radius. Now Control Tab back, and let's go to Fillet and set it to 0.1. And go ahead, you should be able to select this face here, and it will fillet everything. All right, now we're ready to pattern that. So let's go to the little arrow underneath linear pattern, find circular pattern. We want to set this to equal spacing. We're going to want 5 instances, and then the To put it around here, we're going to go ahead and select, we could select this face right here. All right, and now you'll see there's features and faces. Click in this little box here for features and go ahead and select this and select the fillet face. You could select them right here from the model tree too, the cut extrude 2 and the fillet 1. Those should be selected. Don't select edges, sometimes that doesn't work. Go ahead and hit the green check and you'll notice we get an error message and failed to create the fillet. So it has a little bit of an issue with the fillet. Let's eliminate that and apply it. And let's go to the fillet tool, or actually we could go we could go back to the fillet tool and just go ahead and select those entities. Oops, accidentally selected the edge, so I'll deselect it and I'll get it on those faces and hit apply. Technically, we could actually move the fillet down below there so it's under one roof, you might say. They're all together. Let's bring that down underneath the pattern. And I will actually delete that. And now, if we edit this feature, we could go ahead and select this one. So they will all update together. Having them two separate features, changes always occur in design. And you could really throw some confusion in there if you don't link those all together, especially if they're supposed to be the same size. Someone might change one and not realize that there was an extra one there. That is AKA sloppy modeling. So that's why I went ahead and I fixed that. Okay, and that completes that exercise 12. Now let's take a look at lab 12. So I'm going to go back to the web page here, the part files, and you'll see lab 12 drawing. Click on that and hit download. And this is a DWG. I was hoping I made it as a DXF, but unfortunately I didn't. But DWGs and DXFs, they work the same way. And I'm going to go ahead and just save the file. And now let's go back in here. I'm going to go to File, Open. And there's the L12. Go ahead and open that up. Now this one, we're going to import directly into a part and see some of the options that become available with that. You have 3D curves or 2D sketch. If it's a DXF file, you do have 3D curves. Also DWG files can contain those as well. This is purely 2D that we're working with, so just hit next. Now there are some layers that it shows here. I'm going to change the background color, and that's why, because it was in black, so turn it to white background. And what this is actually a series of glyphs that are drawn out for a hose container that would be outside of a house, and it would be made out of perhaps aluminum or some sort of sheet steel, and it would be perhaps water jet or plasma cut for decorative outdoor things. But anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and notice you do have the ability to add constraints and import dimensions. We can do that, or we don't have to. It's purely an option. How do you want to import it as inches, feet, so on and so forth. Import each layer into a new sketch. We don't want that. Let's go ahead and hit next. And then this is what I was talking about earlier when we were doing the last exercise. If there's any gaps, and the reason you might think, like, why would there be gaps on a drawing? When someone draws something, it should be precise and accurate. Well, early versions of the software where people were learning, like, for example, the Autocads or whatever software they learned back in the 80s and or 90s, they didn't always learn the right methods, or sometimes even the precision of some of the earlier CAD systems was so low that perhaps the lines didn't meet up. And draftsmen were being converted to CAD detailers, and they didn't realize that you had to zoom up on things to actually lock them in correctly. So older drawings might have that issue. This gives you the ability to set the distance gap and how far you want it to capture or catch those types of errors and automatically extend them out so that they create watertight boundary conditions so that you could extrude it. And that's all that is. It's actually a very nice feature. Years ago in the 90s, I remember it was an additional cost to buy that. So it's nice that it's just included now. Okay, so anyhow, let's, there's also run, repair, sketch, merge, overlapping entities, things like that. In this case, it's a pretty clean sketch. We don't need to do any of that, but note that those tools are in there and they're excellent. Hit finish. And here we could see our geometry came in. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take a look at how we can modify this. So I'm going to go up here to the front view orientation again. And let's say that you have a customer who's asking you to make this, and the artist actually has decided that, you know, I don't like where that frog is. Let's move that over here somewhere. Now, we saw earlier how you could select something and move it around. What I'd like to show you now is this. If you right-click, there's the select chain. So it grabs all the curves. In this case, there's only 2 curves there. And then up here, you have a series of move, copy, rotate, scale, and stretch entities. So move entities, if we click on that, and look over on the left, you have from and to. And that means a start point and an end point. Or you have X and Y. So you could actually put in explicit values for detailed instructions where it's supposed to be located. But let's go from and to, and we'll take a look here. I'm just going to click here, and then you'll see I can move it over there and click again. All right, hit the little arrow. Let's go to copy entities. Let's say we want to make a duplicate of one of these. I'm going to select this, and I'll select the frog again. Right click, select, oops. You know what, I might have to actually just select them both holding control. I didn't see the tool there again. Okay, now again it's from and to, pretty much the same thing. I'm going to right click and then click, and then it makes a copy right there. All right, let's take a look at another option here. Now there's rotate. Go ahead and select rotate. And to rotate the entities, we just have to select them. So let's go ahead and control select these. Well, actually, we don't have to hold control. Whenever there's a blue box, you typically don't have to do it. So I guess I didn't have to do it last time either. Just wasn't paying attention. Okay, and then the center of rotation and the degrees. You just basically, let's say we want to rotate it here. You click, and notice your left mouse button, or your pointer actually has a mouse button with the left mouse button with the rotate. So you could manually drag this and rotate it around. And that's interesting. It's not moving from the center, which I'm not digging, but that's okay. And then over here we could rotate, let's say we want to rotate it 90 degrees. Hit enter. And okay, that's not doing exactly what I thought it would do. For some reason, maybe I have to select a point or something to have it lock into. So rotate point. Click on that. Let's click on that point, and let's try this again. All right. Well, it's not rotating as I had hoped. Probably operator error on my part. I'm going to just cancel out of that. But usually you do have the ability to rotate. Not sure why I'm having a difficult time with that one, but you can tinker around with it. I've had it working before. That's the first time I've ever seen that happen. But anyhow, there's also scale entities. So you could go ahead and click on those 2 entities there. Scale about. Let's click in the center here. And now let's adjust this. Let's make it 0.5 and hit enter. Notice there's a copy option too. And so there it's scaled from the center, making a smaller frog. And finally, there's stretch entities. Let's click on stretch entities, and we'll do the frog again. Let's see what that does. Okay, stretch about. Click in the center there. And click. And I wasn't able to do that. Maybe it's possible due to the geometry. Not quite sure. Maybe if it were more of a linear line, a line of some sort, it might do that better than that. Anyhow, I went into this and practiced with that. I hadn't used it in quite a while. But as you can see, there's a number of options there. Feel free to tinker with those or take a look at SolidWorks tutorials and find out maybe what I might be doing wrong there. Okay. Anyhow, now what we can do here is, let's say we want to extrude these out. We could go to Features and go to Extrude Boss Base. And because there's multiple contours, you have to go in and actually select the contours that you would like to actually extrude. So let's say we want all three of these as one. And then we could specify the thickness of the metal and then hit the green check mark. And that concludes this exercise.